Hello, y'all. Welcome. I'm super pumped to be here. My name is Jesse Johnson, spiritual teacher, coach, sales educator
Holy moly.
spiritual teachers and healers who want to build seven-figure businesses. And I am fucking honored to be joined by my husband and co-host,
Hello.
Sri. Can I just sing your praises?
I am Srikala. Please continue to sing my praises, Jesse Johnson.
Srikala is an amazing musician. He's an amazing, heart in the world. His heart is a big, bold heart, and he uses that heart to transmit deep love through sound vibration, through healing, through coaching, through freaking event production, through social media,
through
innovation, through skateboard. He's
through
brilliant,
walking down the street,
multi-dimensional human. And not to be, do you want to add anything to that, Shri?
No, that was great. I'm really excited to get to our guests.
Do you want to introduce them?
About that. Yes, we can definitely keep going on the tag team. I love these two people. These are definitely two of my most favorite people on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very excited to be in this quartet with everyone. We have Nico Nelson. She's in the bottom left in your screen.
In this corner.
She is a epic photographer, epic videographer, just visuals on crack. She's so good with visuals, you will feel like you are the king of the world. And you are behind her camera. That's what I mean. Because, sometimes. Anyway. Nico, very excited to have you here. She also went with us to India. That was a magical, amazing trip. And she was part of the team, part of the crew, helped us document it. And she's an amazing singer. Holy moly.
I had no idea.
I'm very excited about that.
Thanks, Shri. That was awesome. I'm super pumped to be here, and I love this group of people. It's just so high key. I can't even top just looking at them, So, so thanks for having me.
Last but not least, Riyaana Hartley, director, filmmaker, documentarian, brilliant at literally everything she does. I have yet to see her not show up at the top level of excellence, and we've played in lots of different spaces in my company and outside. So Riyaana holds a very high standard of excellence. For me, I feel like I get called to a higher standard because Rihanna's in my life. So friend and thank goodness part of my team. Tonight we are gathering as a team. So we have these personal relationships. We know each other in all these different contexts. This particular circle quartet, I want to acknowledge as very, very consciously active in talking about race, success, and spirituality as part of Jesse Johnson coaching over the last month. And so we really wanted to bring them in, Riyaana and Nico, as our guests to talk more about what their experience of the last month and lifetime has been, and specifically where we've been challenged. I think there's an opportunity for us to get messy tonight in a way that Shri and I have been continuously trying to get messy, but maybe there's another level of comfort and possibility that we have together because we work so closely together. So I just want to invite that out the gate.
I like that. We kind of eased off the messy gate. We eased off the messy pedal, better said. And I like the invitation to just shake things up a little bit. I don't know what that means, but hey.
Let's go for it. Yeah.
Let's do it. Anybody watching right now, drop a comment. Let us know that you're here. Say hello. Let us know how beautiful we are. And we will continue to radiate that beauty back to you wherever you are in the world.
Yes.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, and take advantage of being here live, because if you have questions for Nico, Riyaana, or Shri or myself, you can ask them and we'll actually answer. later on a bit harder. So we've got some very diverse perspectives here. I think that's a really important part of these conversations. So I invite you guys to be very loud and frequent in your commenting.
And belligerent. Feel free to release y'all full belligerence.
Bring on the emojis. Tell us how you feel. All caps. It's fine.
Yeah.
I feel
We
like
prefer.
that's actually a really like sweet segue. And Riyaana, I'm just gonna like start with you. What in the last month, let's just keep it like since George Floyd's murder, what has caused you to feel the most belligerent?
Ooh, I love that question. What has caused me to feel really belligerent in this experience, and I trust that it's going to be so different for each and every one of us, has been my knee-jerk reactions to friends, associates, colleagues, anyone that I know in the digital sphere who isn't showing up the way that I want them to, who isn't saying the thing that I want them to, or aligning with the viewpoints that I want. And it's just been really wild to watch that, to observe me being like, why don't you feel the same way I do? I'm being like, dang girl, you're being belligerent. Everyone is allowed to have, you know, their experience. And also, I think it's worthwhile for everyone to ask where they're being belligerent and like give it a moment and like honor that whiling out, because there's something to it. And for me, it got to the point where I was like, yo, I cannot spend all my days tripping about how other people think, feel, and express themselves. And it starts to be not just a preoccupation, but like a burden on the heart when you're upset with people for who they are and how they're showing up. And so that wasn't sustainable and I was tripping. So I had to really lean into my compassion and think about, why would this person have that opinion? Or why would they not? Or maybe they don't feel comfortable sharing, you know, how they really feel, and what would that be about? And it really brought me to a place of like dissipating the belligerence, because you have to, right? That's like, you slow down when you put yourself in the shoes of other people, and just recognizing like, okay, this is where they're coming from. And a lot of how people are choosing to show up or not show up right now, it's so deeply tied to a sense of safety, a sense of belonging, how they feel about themselves. And if they've not like really gone in and looked at that, then like, okay, I have compassion for that. But yeah, for a while I was belligerent, I was tripping. I was like, everybody should feel this way and F you if you don't. And that's not what it's about at all.
I'm curious, like, what, in some ways it's obvious, okay, but I think it would be helpful to understand more what your experience, like what changed for you that had you go, or was it all, has it always been this way? Like, have you always been scrolling social media belligerently pissed off at people not speaking up about the things that matter to you?
That's a really relevant question to this time. I feel like I've had an awareness of this, what previously kind of felt like a disappointment in humanity. And that's harsh. That's like super heavy to just go around feeling like, what the fuck is the matter with everybody? And y'all are disappointing me. And that was another example of a burden that we shouldn't carry. It doesn't actually help us. And what I was that person. I was like constantly, you know, like screaming into the Instagram, especially after the 2016 election. And what I honestly found was I was pushed to a point where I had to speak from my own personal experience, and it was really, really, really vulnerable. One of those like speak your truth even if your voice shakes kind of periods in my life. And I feel like what I was sharing at the time in 2016 was falling not even on deaf ears. People were reading it, hearing it, because there were videos as well. And there was a lot of this like, oh girl, I just don't even know how to respond to that right now. Like I'm not ready. No one else is in this boat. Like I can't go out on that limb with you. And it was very heartbreaking to feel alone out on that limb. And after a while, it wasn't something I could continue to invest in, just like feeling frustrated that no one else was showing up the way that I wanted them to. Thankfully, that led me to like, you know, do your own inner work, like focus on your own personal healing, like take care of you. And in the perfection of life, you know, fast forward to where we are now, and I feel like that experience allows me to take a step back and be like, okay, well, where are they coming from? You know, what are they going through that they can't meet me where I'm at? And it was a long journey, and it also helped me realize that right now my place isn't posting a video every day or, you know, living in the angst and the frustration and the anger. I went through that phase, and I know that I am here to be of service in a much different way, because that's what I've been prepared for. And that's even what I'm preparing now, is how to impact in something that is such an integral part of my life story, in a meaningful way and in a way that's sustainable. Because yeah, just tripping, just staying in the anger, that's not where the train stops. Yeah.
Nico, I've seen you nod like 4 times while Riyaana's been talking without asking another question. Do you want to jump in here? I don't want to take us in a new direction without hearing from you.
Yeah, I feel you so hard, you know, Riyaana. It's like that, I mean, and I think it comes out in different ways. And for me, it's like my judgmental mind comes out. It's like, what's wrong with these people? Like, why don't they get it? Like, are you stupid? You know, like all that shit comes up, right? And you know, I also went through a similar phase of just being really in the deep trenches of it, and you know, suffer, like secondhand suffering, if that's like a thing, you know, and re-traumatizing myself actually by getting so deep into people's stories. And it's, I don't think that there's nothing bad about that at all. I mean, it was something that needed to happen, but you're right. It's like, we can't just end there. And I think from my perspective, I think what I can see now is like a lot of reasons why people don't want to do the work is because they think that's where it ends. Because the model of the activist, it's a certain stereotype, right? It's a certain like archetype of person. And I think that people only see that side of it, and they don't realize like the true activists are the ones that are deeply spiritual, deeply healing on the inside, like, and that they're doing their work. And the reason they can keep doing it, like Angela Davis is still alive. She's teaching at UC Santa Cruz. You know what I mean? Like that woman lived through like the Black Panther Party and civil rights. And like, she's still here and serving with just like so much grounded love. And it's like, that's what it's got to be grounded in. And I think the process is, yeah, it's to go through that anger phase. And then it's like a spiritual portal, and you go out the other side and you're like, oh wait, yeah, if I'm going to sustain myself in this, it's got to be because I'm protecting what I love. It's got to be because I'm working towards seeing more of what I love in the world, and not because like, fuck these guys, you know, like, yeah.
I'm curious, Nico, if there was a specific moment for you that came up when you first heard that question about belligerence. Like, has there been a specific moment where you were just like I do my love and compassion work, but fuck,
I mean, yeah. And I think what I love about this time is that I feel like I've been given almost a permission slip that I think I needed to like externalize my belligerency, because I think I kept it more inside and in closed conversations and in safe spaces where I knew like it could be held and it could be received, and like people would be like, yeah, totally, fuck them, you know, like, and I wouldn't have to explain myself or like, you know, do a bunch of emotional labor around it. So I think, yeah, during this time, I think my belligerency has just been like not patting people on the back for doing stuff that like we should just be doing, you know? And I think that before there was a kind of like guilt or maybe pandering that I felt like I needed to do for people in my circles that were like, but I'm doing my best, and like, and great, like keep doing that, but like I'm not gonna like sit there and hold your hand and be like, oh, good job, you know? Like, so I think the belligerency for me has just been like the freedom of just being like, cool, you know, like, and then I'm over here.
It seems like this is a big time for anger work. It's a big, juicy time for that work, and I like that we're talking about belligerence. When I think of belligerence, I think of anger. I don't know how deeply they connect, but I feel like they're quite synonymous.
The root of like the Latin root of belligerence, I think, is like bellum or something like that, and it means war. So belligerence is like the anger of war, or the anger that's required to wage war, or the anger that causes war.
Yeah, so juicy. I mean, anger for me is definitely the quality that I have been working on trying to feel in the past like couple of years, because I love keeping the vibe right, peaceful. If you're getting too dramatic and crazy around me, I'm like, I'm going over here, you know? That and one of my big realization is like, bring that anger in, pull out your swords. You know, it says sadhu, the definition of a sadhu is the one who cuts. You know, it's like someone that is so deeply connected, but at the same time they can get really intense when it's necessary. And it feels like the whole world right now is going through a deep dive into like collective anger. It's like we're all getting to really process what it means to like be in anger in a way that's appropriate, you know, in a way that's healing, transformative, you know. Have you guys experienced that? Have you beautiful women, spiritual, indigenous,
thank you,
women of color experienced anger, or like a new level of anger?
You know, it's not feeling very much on the surface for me, and I think that's okay too. I've had a weird, not weird, groundedness, Nico, and calmness throughout this experience, and I feel like it has to do with the collective experience, but just kind of trusting in this feeling that we're collectively evolving right now. And because I just feel that and know that to be so true, I haven't slipped into anything other than we are where we need to be. You know, like the anger is so warranted. It is so part of what a lot of people are needing to wake up at this moment. I feel like everyone is getting just the right medicine that they need, and not just about race. To me, so much of what we've been witnessing is we can talk about it in the micro about like systemic racism and our racial relationships, but so much of it is just about like, I feel how we evolve, you know, spiritually and how we're connecting to each other. You know, when I think about the skills that we're all learning about, like listening to each other, not assuming, just like one of the big things for me these days is reminding myself and others that we all live on this planet, and literally every one of us 7.5 billion people lives in a different world. And we don't take that into account. I'm just like, your experience is probably like mine. And it's like, no, we should not. We should interrupt that. And this is part of what's happening, is this massive, healing calamity that is forcing us to realize, like, yo, we can't go around expecting that people are having our experience. And I think that's where so much of, my belligerence was coming from, was like, why don't you get this? And then being like, oh, your experience is actually nothing like mine. And you're maybe not at that space yet. And that's, and that's okay. So yeah, collective spiritual evolution. I can't help but trust that. So I feel pretty grounded, oddly enough.
I really like that.
What do you like?
As you're listening? As I'm listening. I like. I really enjoy what Riyaana just said. Why? Because it's such an important feature, that realization that's coming onto the planet of what is that other person experiencing actually, in the sense of, for the cop that took George Floyd's life, and his being, he was probably thinking, I know exactly what's going on in that person, George Floyd. So in his own mind, he had already had George Floyd figured out, and probably vice versa. And then for us watching, can we put ourselves in each of those people's experience? It's like this. It's a treacherous adventure, to put yourself in an oppressor's shoes, emotional state, But I think it's necessary.
It's the perfect segue to what I wanted to share, which I'm like getting a lot of clarity as you guys are talking. There's a concept that comes from group theory, like psychoanalytic group theory, that in every group, whether it's a family group, a classroom group, a team, even in partnership, although it's much more, I feel like it's more fun and complex and nuanced in a larger group, but there's a concept called Rolllock. So I learned about this when I was teaching high school. So like the clearest example was always like the kid who was always causing trouble, entertaining the class with his generally mischief, right? So it's like that dynamic, which I feel like we've all experienced, right? We all were in a classroom at one point with a troublemaking young peer, right? The one who was always telling Nico, like, were you that person?
That was me. That was totally me. I don't know what happened.
This is the right group tonight.
Remember when you guys yelled at me on the rickshaw in India?
Oh, yeah.
It's my whole childhood.
Okay, so
constantly having Nico out.
This is amazing, because actually I think you'll have an insight that I don't think is often brought when I hear people teach this principle. But the point is that in the beginning of, I'm going to stick with the classroom setting. In the beginning of school, that kid is generally enjoyed by the rest of the class. That's why they're allowed to disrupt in the way that they do, because it's entertaining. It means that the rest of the class doesn't have to do what the teacher tells them to, but they don't really have to take the blame for it. Like there's this collaboration in the group to put this person in this role. But if that person maintains that role the whole year, at some point, the entire class will come to hate that person. Not because the role that they're playing is bad or wrong or no longer entertaining or anything like that, but because there has been this experience of locked roles. So one of the things that I learned to do as a classroom teacher was, like, let's just say it was Nico, who was the classic troublemaker in the class. I would come into class and say, who wants to be Nico today? Like, who wants to do, like, Nico's been working too hard to entertain y'all. Who's going to do that for her so she can take a break? To invite someone else to step into that role, because what's best for the group, what's best for the collective, is for those roles to exist, but for them to move. Roles have to be fluid for the health of the group. Otherwise, the groups will self-destruct. So what's been happening in our collective, we can look at it at so many levels, but one of the things that I'm hearing when you talk, Riyaana, is that you have been sort of stuck in the role of holding the anger about the injustice of the world. And something has shifted in the last month, and you literally don't have to hold it anymore. There's plenty of other people holding it now. So you get to be free to play a different role. And not that you weren't working on that before or experiencing that before, but like, as I listened to you, that was the image that I had, was like somebody else has said, I'll play Nico today. I'll be the entertaining troublemaker today. Nico, you can just like study. You can just learn algebra today. I got you. Is this making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. I love that.
300%.
400. Why not?
Yeah, let's just keep going up.
But I feel like that's like the perfect way to, you know, walk the mile in somebody else's shoes. Like we were just talking about, we don't have the practice of being like, oh wait, your experience isn't my experience. Let me think. What has your life been like? What have you gone through? And when we get to like try on something else, even if it's just for a little bit, oh my gosh, it's like breakthrough insights, because that's not usually how we're looking at the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And yeah, we all need a break.
Yeah.
I have like so many things. I have so many things that are coming up. It's like I'm trying to pick which one to start with. But I just want to share that, you know, like before this whole thing started, shout out to my homegirl, Jess. I don't know if she's watching, but you know, a friend of mine who's really steeped in nonviolent communication kind of brought me into that community. And I sat in my first couple classes and I was like, holy shit, like it's so simple, but the violence begins right when you make an assumption about someone else's experience. That's where it begins. It's like the seed starts there. And then we project, and then we create story, and pretty soon we're angry at the other person, or we're othered, or we're hurt, or we're sad, you know, and like seeing how in this conversation, a lot of the times it's like, that's where it starts. It's like, we think we know, and really we have no freaking idea, like what someone's going through, what they've been through, what they're struggling with. And I think that's where the compassion and the capacity of the human heart has to kick in, of like, you know, and what we were talking about having messy conversations is like, of course we're not going to get it right. Like this is all new territory of trying to globally have a conversation about systemic oppression and trying to globally change something that's been deeply rooted in our bones, in our DNA for like over 400 years. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's the part where the healing does come in. And I think that all the anger, it's like with the looting and like people, you know, freaking out about violent protests and creating this kind of like binary of like, oh, this is peaceful, this is not peaceful. You know, I think that part of that has been like, we just kind of want to shut away that part. We don't want to look at the fact that like, that's a physical manifestation of like everything that's being held inside by people and on the shoulders and the backs of marginalized communities. That those are the people that have been holding the burden. And then they're like, oh shit, wait, like, can I just give this to you? Like, you know what I mean? And that's not the solution either, right? It's not like to just pass around the trauma, but it's like, I think there's that claiming of like, yeah, like, I don't want to hold this anymore. So what do I do with it? We don't know what to do with it. So there it is, right? And I think just with anger in general, because it's funny how like I feel like personally, whatever's going on collectively, it's just so mirrored in my experience right now. And I'm sure anybody out there that's listening is like, oh yeah, like totally feel that, you know. But with anger, it's like something I'm personally also trying to get in touch with, Sri, being someone that just kind of internalized it, you know, and then thought it was like depression for a long time until like I had a teacher who like works with rage, who was like, no, you're just freaking angry. Like, you know, and you just haven't been able to express it. And every time you try, you collapse. And I think that's really the kind of collective thing of like, oh, we're, you know, especially marginalized communities, when you express anger, you're beaten down. So then what do? You internalize it, and it becomes addiction. It becomes poverty. It becomes, you know, domestic abuse. Like, I mean, there's just so many different things that we want to kind of put on people, but that I feel it's like internalized oppression. That's ripping through communities. So now it's like, okay, how do we hold that together? How do we heal together as a global community?
I think that's why it's so important that all of this momentum now starts to transition into the collective healing. You know, there comes a point where we do sort of let a little bit of that steam out, and we find ourselves at another juncture. And I think it's really important for people in these kinds of communities to really now stick a hand out and say, you know, take my hand. Now is the time for healing. You know, this is not the time to just fall back until the next uprising. You know, you got to go in to get out, and going in right now is the healing work, which is something that is systemically also not available to marginalized communities, because it is, you know, it could be inaccessible. For certain people, it is almost a privilege to have the time or the resource to really dive into that. But it is available, you know, and if you want it, it's going to find its way to you. And I think especially now there's an outpouring of support, and how can we help? And I think that we really need to dial up and point more fingers to like healing work, you know, for the community and individually, because that is how we are sustained in this lifetime of work that is ahead of us. And so much of it too is, if we can't dismantle like the systemic oppression inside of our psyche, inside of our soul, like we're fucked anyway. Like if you can't get into the worthiness, the belonging, the safety, the relationship with the divine, like quite frankly, like new politicians is not going to be the answer. Like we have to, we have to go in there and you know, start getting to those, like literally the prayers of ancestors. You know, that we feel good, that we can be on this planet and feel good about ourselves and feel good day to day, because systemic change is one thing, but that internal healing is crucial, and not just for people of color who have to unpack, you know, some, again, super root issue kinds of things about like the belonging and the safety and the worthiness and whatever. But on the other end of the spectrum too, like the communities, the lineages of the people who have been doing the oppressing, hello, they need that healing hardcore as well, because it might not manifest as, you know, not having a sense of safety and belonging, but it could manifest like an epidemic of, you know, American white male suicide, an epidemic of American white males shooting everybody, like mass shootings, you know, every other day. That is a cry for healing, and it's the work is here for us all right now. And I think if you don't see how it's intertwined, then you're kind of still, you got to wipe more of the sleep out of your eye because it's related. So I'm all about, you know, part of the conversation of social justice and social equity and restructuring things is bring the healing resource to communities and people individually.
Yes. So we need the ability to grow our own food. We need to be in touch with our ancestral healing practices, our ancestors, our roots. Like we need to have even the thought in our heads that like we have time, we have money, we deserve to heal, you know? And I think if you're if you're in this country, and, you know, for me, like, my mother's a refugee from Vietnam, and like I grew up mostly with her, and her mentality is like, there's no time for healing. We just have to work, because like we got to get what we need, because it's very scary when you don't have what you need. And that's, and I think it's like that mentality to break down and realize like that's what we're talking about. It's like internalized oppression, internalized white supremacy is, it doesn't matter what your skin looks like on the outside, it's in us all, and it destroys us all. It's not something that's, even if it's like on the surface, like benefiting people who look a certain way, it's destroying them from the inside.
Yeah.
Well, and that's, I don't want to I don't think it's a dead horse.
Beat it.
So
Beat it.
The insight that I feel like I'm making the connection between this relatively small group principle of Rolllock and how it destroys the entire group. It's not just the one kid, nor is it like that one kid is annoying for the group. That one kid serves the group. Everyone agrees to it. Totally unconsciously. It's not like any kids are talking about it. They're like, this happens in kindergarten classes, okay? 5-year-olds do this. To make the connection of seeing that Rolllock principle and how destructive it is at the global level, or the national level, or the cultural level, and then be able to also like use what I know about what works in that group context, which by the way is revolutionary. I mean, I'm very unusual as a school teacher in having any training in that at all. Most school teachers have no idea. And so like this, it's not like this is mainstream technology. But for me, it feels very potent to understand, Nico, what you're saying, that like this is destructive for all, and here's why. And also, when we change roles, it is a generative and generous thing. And then to bring it back, like I just think it's super cool because the 4 of us are inside a group at Jesse Johnson Coaching. There's a couple more of us that are not here, but we experience that every time we have a meeting. So there's also, even on a very local level, the opportunity for, you know, I think you guys see Sri do this pretty regularly, for Sri to be like, Jesse, like, stop being the one who works so hard. Like, let me be the one that works so hard, or whatever. Like, we have our professional titles. Those don't necessarily need to change, but that the social emotional roles that we play, the personal roles that we play in the group dynamic need to change, need to be fluid. And that as we do that work in our very small team, that also prepares us to better do that work in other spaces. And one last thing is that I'm realizing that I feel like that's what we're doing right now. Like Jesse Johnson Coaching, like interviews spiritual teachers and healers out in the world who are doing amazing things. And you guys are that. But to me, it feels kind of radical that we're like, you guys would not normally be the go-tos as members of Jesse Johnson Coaching. To have your voices like brought up feels very significant to me. Not just because, like, for all because of your histories, perspectives, and also because you support Jesse Johnson Coaching. So to have you guys who are normally kind of behind the scenes doing all this stuff to make Jesse Johnson Coaching thrive, come out and take center stage feels really important. And I don't have a question right now. I just wanted to
shout out to Jesse Johnson for having such a diverse team.
Yes.
Crushing it
really.
on the team diversity here and the colorful faces. There's this feature of martyrdom. There's this feature of being a martyr that you just spoke to, Jesse, in the sense of like, even the one that works really hard is almost the one that is like sacrificing themselves on behalf of the group, you know? And you also brought this up, Nico, the reality of Angela Davis and how she's still alive and how she's been, you know, an active voice in civil rights. And right now she's doing more conscious, more spiritual things, and she's connecting to the root of who she is. And as time goes on, it feels like the need for martyrs are less and less. Like this whole idea that I need to be shot on a balcony of some hotel room, like Martin Luther King Jr. was, or you know, any of the ways some of these most epic people that brought so much change into the world, Gandhi. These are all people that have died for a cause, and it feels so much so like also connected to what Riyaana is saying about bringing in the healing, bringing in the connection with understanding what's going on inside of the heart, what's going on in your own mind and your own emotions, and mastering that and having a handle on that is like the way out of that paradigm of martyrdom. It's like we could like make a bunch of noise and then die, you know, and then have everyone like he or she died, yeah, let's burn everything, you know. Or we can go almost like the positive urgency route. You know, like, how can I do the work to transform the world around me?
Yeah. I hear you saying each one teach one, which, you know, that, and also it reminds me again of this whole like spiritual evolution, that we don't necessarily need, you know, the martyrdom and the pain and the victimization that comes with all of that. Because again, Nico, like you were saying, that stuff becomes generational. That gets in the bones and it's just there. I think now the amazing opportunity is for, in our own self-empowerment, to then to be able to turn around immediately and, you know, help the person right next to us. Or even just in the sheer living of like us embodying, you know, our purpose and our royalty and just the truth of knowing who we are, like just walking in that is the opposite of martyrdom. You know, that's the invitation on the street. Like, yo, what's up with that guy? What's up with that woman? The way that they just hold their head up and the way that they speak about themselves and what they're envisioning for their life. Like that is the kind of contagion that we need, right? Like, let's pass that along. And I totally see that as part of, I mean, even the transition of where we're all like previously caught up in religiosity, like very zealous about individual religions. And now most people these days, younger people, would identify as having more of their own individual spiritual practice, still rooted in these beautiful traditions. But we've come to the point now where we're seeking that individual connection, relationship, understanding of God. And I think it's the same for our salvation and what we can do for ourselves and our community. So I'm about that. I don't think we need martyrdom culture.
Well, I mean, because we can't just wait for someone else to be killed, right? It's like, this is what happens. It's the news cycle. It's like someone dies and they become the poster for a month and people go crazy and everyone's all of a sudden, you know, posting and sharing and doing this. And then it's the news cycle. And then the next thing happens and everyone's like, COVID, what? You know, like, it's, that's the urgency that you're speaking to, Srikala. It's like, we have to do it now and all the time. And until we're in some kind of utopia where like everyone's just like naked,
it's gonna be done. It's gonna like the issue is gonna be over, and we're still gonna be like, Black Lives Matter. Racism is done, and we're still like marking. Why not? Hey, let's have a party.
We do forever.
Let's keep it going. Let's just keep it going.
I mean,
I have a question. You, Nico, have been someone that has been very active in your voice within the indigenous community and the oppression that's been happening there. Like, I feel like did you go to Standing Rock?
You know, no, I didn't. I ended up actually giving someone else money because I decided if I had the money to go out there that I should just give it to someone who is native that needed to be there. So that was my reasoning. And then I just like was glued to my laptop, like sending videos and like, you know, following everything.
I'm so curious, like what's your take, being that you have been focused on those issues and now Black Lives Matter comes in. How are you, like, is one issue the same issue across the board for you, are you focusing your energy right now? And you're like, okay, we're focusing over here because that's the topic of the month. Or does this all connect in some way? Like, how are you experiencing, Indigenous life matter versus Black Lives Matter?
Well, it's like the thing is, like, we have, I would say, the two largest marginalized groups in this country are Indigenous people and Black folks. Like, it's just obvious. And the thing is, whatever is being called for in the Black community right now is going to be not only beneficial to everybody, but also beneficial, from what I'm hearing from, my connections and who I follow and who I'm reading, it's like Indigenous people also suffer from police brutality and violence. They suffer from, a lot of what's been going on lately, is like man camps that are being set up to build pipelines. And then the men are there, these like workers, and women are disappearing. Indigenous women are disappearing, missing and murdered Indigenous women is like a huge movement right now. That's really, they really want attention on it. And, it's interesting that you're bringing this up, because I remember when that whole thing went down in Portland, where everyone was on the bridge. Did you guys see that photo of everyone that did the die-in, and they were all laying down, and it like filled this whole huge bridge in Portland. And I remember it was beautiful. And I saw the photo and I just started crying. It was amazing. And but I remember Lila June posting, who's an Indigenous activist, and she's an amazing musician and writer. I remember her posting, and she was like, not going to lie, I'm a little jealous. And she was like, I'm totally happy, and supportive of the Black community, but I'm a little bit jealous of how everyone's shown up for this. And, I think that it's like the other day, even I was like, oh shit, it's time to like focus back attention over here, because, and it's like the things are just endless, right? I mean, if you're really trying to like show up for every single movement that exists in the world, it's like exhausting, and that's activist burnout. But I think that like, for me, it's just seeing how like, okay, there's certain issues that I feel like I can, that feel accessible to me to tackle. And the one thing is, like, I live in Los Angeles. We have one of the worst police departments in the country, one of the most violent, one of the most murderous, right? And so for me, it's like, that's affecting everybody here. And in LA, we have Indigenous people that are, that are from this area, and then we're pushed down towards what is now Mexico, but they're still here also. Like, this is their land as well. And they're also suffering from the same things. So it's like, for me, it's really like, how can we be the most effective? How can we do something that we know is going to benefit not only everybody, but like, it's really going to be like this. If we can take down this one major oppressive structure, it's really going to benefit like a lot of different communities. And so I think that's been my focus, is like, all right, let's just like deal with these popo, like let's deal with these police, like, you know what I mean? Like,
shit's gotta change. Reminds me of we were talking earlier, Jesse. We were talking today about we were doing some somatic work with our group, and we were kind of tuning into a spot into the body, and like using that spot to vocalize. And doing that in one spot allowed other spots in people's bodies to wake up. So it's like a guitar. When you tune one string on the guitar, all the other strings, you're like, what? Now you can really hear that the other strings are out of tune, or I even know where to go next with that one tuning. Like, now that that's tuned, I can now tune the other strings, So there's a powerful space of like giving a certain area exclusive love, so that it kind of like raises up to where other things are, so that everything else receives that spillover of support. What was that like? Jesse's head exploded.
Mind blown.
Because I just like put together that whole Rolllock thing is another way of talking about what we talked about.
You're still on that.
And it's just
Rolllock.
It's all connected.
Rolllock.
It's totally all connected.
Like the ego,
I feel like,
right? The ego is the one who gets locked in charge, generally speaking, right? And so in a way, like all spiritual practice is about dismantling not the ego, but the fixation on the ego as being the one making all the decisions. And so much of the work that I do when I work with people around making money, which seems like such a material, frankly, like superficial and like business focused thing, it's actually like almost all the work that I do with people is helping them like understand who all's in here, who are all these different parts, and like figure out what they actually want. What are they trying to communicate with their bad behavior, with their acting out, with their
stop having the police in your mind go to like be the ones that you go to for healing or for help or for like self-confidence or whatever, right? It's like those need to be different people, and that's what we're doing collectively is like
I love that.
Huge.
There's some dismantling, you know, of structures that needs to happen in here for sure. I totally think that's super relevant. And there's another way to come at this. You know, I think it's really important. Yes, remove the structure, change the structure because it's systemic. It's touching everything, and also kind of like centralized and decentralized. Each one of us individually. You know, I think in just sharing our story and letting all of the different parts within us have a chance to speak and share, that is another way to come at it. So if there are these parts inside of you, these different strings of the guitar that haven't been plucked and haven't had their chance to say their thing, when they finally are given that opportunity, like you're saying, it's going to bring everything else into harmony. It's going to like, oh, okay, it's all going to perk up. So that doesn't only happen with the different parts of us needing to say like, you know, when I've experienced this in my youth and I've never talked about it, and this is how I really feel, and this is how it's affecting me today, and it's affecting my money, and it's affecting so on and so forth, like give it the voice because it is going to shift the other personas inside of us. And it does, I love that, take ego out of that locked, you know, like I hear like the loudspeaker, remove it from that for a moment. And then I think what can start to happen is we become empowered enough to start telling our stories to each other. And that's when the shit really goes down in a beautiful way, because, you know, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a director, I'm all about tell your story. And I also recognize that in a way it's almost easier said than done, right? It's almost like cliche to hear, tell your story, find your voice, so on and so forth. That is some work. Have you done this?
Yeah,
have you told people your story? Have you found your voice? That shit is no walk in the park. You got to get in there. And it is a beautiful process of, to your point, Jesse, you know, like finding the shy parts and saying like, it's okay. What do you have to say? And so when we finally get to that place where we've come far enough along that we can talk about our experience, we can talk about our ancestors, we can talk about our trauma, we can talk about like, yeah, I know I've known you for 20 years, but this is what you're not seeing. Like I've had to experience X, Y, and Z, and it does make me feel a certain way. That is so vulnerable and so empowering, and it opens the door for then the other person to tell us their story. And I think that's when we finally get to make progress with that whole just assuming everybody is having our experience, you know. Tell your story and ask other people to share theirs. I think that's we need to make that the new thing. Like ask people what their story is, right? Because like sometimes people need an invitation.
That's cool. Instead of tell your story, like share your story. That's cool.
Yeah. And it's like this is why this time is so powerful, Riyaana. Like to your point, it's like people have been trying to tell their stories for a really long time, and there's been a large majority of people on the planet that just won't listen. Like I had a, you know, I mean, and people are now, you know, so it's like I don't want to just stick in the past and in the negative. It's just like just to bring that to the group, and you know, just to name that, like, you know, I was having a conversation with someone the other day conversation. It was over Facebook, so whatever that means. But it was like, someone brought up the fact that like a big book that people are kind of circulating around right now about race was written by a white woman. And it's cool. Like a lot of people have benefited from the book. I think it's good. And I think we need like everyone in the conversation. But what it brought up for me was like, holy shit, like people have been writing books forever. And like every Black author that's ever existed has written about racism in America. Like Maya Angelou, Assata Shakur, Angela Davis, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. Like, I mean, you could just go down the list of people, Ralph Ellison, and every single story is about going through this, right? And telling their personal, very deeply personal, and frankly, like devastating stories, of oppression. And so I think what coming back to your point is just like, yeah, like we like it takes two, right? And so I think that the call right now for people to listen, just to deeply listen and really not turn away from the discomfort of like, well, I don't want to hear that because that makes me feel really guilty, that the bravery of people actually being like, all right, this does make me feel like shit, but like I care about you enough that I'll be uncomfortable so that I can see your humanity and your beauty and like your strength and everything that you've been through.
Yes. The world is waking up. Jesse said something to that point just yesterday, I think it was, where we were watching the 13th on Netflix.
I was just thinking of the same moment. How I was like missing stories that had been right in front of me. Is that what you're thinking about? Yeah, just
that this has been in hip hop music. Like they were in each interval of this documentary, they would play like an old hip hop track, Public Enemy or The Roots, and they were talking like exactly about what was going on today. And then Jesse was just like, oh, she might even been like crying at that point of how like obvious it has always been. And now we're more and more, like you're saying, listening more,
Yeah, and I, because of that, I feel like, Nico, it's actually really important to, I think there's a balance. I think you hit the balance. Bringing in the past matters. Not as a limiting factor, like that dictates what we're going to do. But I think it's really important to be willing to look at the truth. And the past is part of our truth.
Yeah. 100%.
And whatever it is, and to be willing to look at for me, I shared this story with you, Nico, last night about the same moment, but I was talking about Malcolm X, that I had this experience growing up, like almost like baseball teams, that you were supposed to choose Malcolm X or MLK. And that I, as a pacifist, obviously chose MLK. And like, I didn't watch Malcolm X, or I couldn't have. I would have remembered. I didn't watch that movie. So we were watching that movie and I was just like, what? Where the fuck did I get that idea? Like, where was the idea introduced that I could choose who I fucking paid attention to? Which leaders had something relevant to teach me?
They demonized him. They made him into a villain because he didn't play nice. And he said, by any means necessary. He was like, we will come up in there with guns. You have guns, we'll have guns. Like, we will come up in there and kick your motherfucking ass. Yeah. Like, we're not just going to roll over.
Yeah. I think they created a rule because he went into like some government building with his crew and they had full, semi-automatic weapons. And it was legal at that time. And so because of him and because of was the nation of Islam. Yeah. Because of them, they created a rule where you're no longer allowed to take firearms into, like a courthouse building. And I'm like, how did that rule not exist already?
But if we, history repeating itself and why we have to make different choices.
Yes.
A month ago, white men with semi-automatic weapons walked into the state capitol in, I want to say, Minnesota or Michigan.
I think it was Michigan.
And it was all good.
So
it was all good
nonchalant.
just a week ago.
No problems here. There was no one clapped back. No. So there's that. Yeah. And I just want to say really quick about the whole tell your story thing. Like, you know, even if it falls on deaf ears, I don't think that's the point. I think it's in the journey of being able to tell your story that's where the gold is. You know, just to be able to, one of my favorite quotes of all time, and speaking of incredible Black activists and writers, is from James Baldwin. And he says, know from whence you came. If you know from whence you came, there's no limit to where you're going to go or where you'll go. And it is the most true thing, because it's not about, you know, a geography or a victimization. It's about inventorying, like, who the fuck you are and what you've overcome, and like who has been, you know, at your step every single moment along the way. Like, know from whence you came, that you didn't just arrive here by chance, by luck, right? That like from where you came, there are like thousands of ancestors that has your back. You know, from where you came, like there's your own perseverance and your own knowing and special gifts that brought you to that point. And I think it's super important for anyone who has felt, you know, oppressed in any way to do that work. Like, know from whence you came and do that inventory, looking for, just the amazing ways that you've shown up for yourself, you know, and then you will never forget it.
Yeah.
Hearing you say that is very important for me. And as I was listening to you, I was also aware that, just as an example, I mean, Malcolm X is kind of, it's a bizarre thing because he's so famous, but it's like, it did matter. I'm fucking late. Like, I'm late listening to his story. I'm late showing up to learn from him, but I'm doing it now. And I'm super grateful that he made his choices and did what he did and showed up in the world in the way that he did and spoke out. And so I think it's also, like, I hear you, Riyaana, saying, like, tell your story for you. Tell your story because of the empowerment and transformation that will happen for you. Forget who listens. And I'm adding on to that even if fewer people listen, then is right. Like, even if there's still inequity and injustice and not enough people hear, it matters even if one hears. And that one person will spread. Like, these things, I believe that we are here because of all the stories that people have shared up until now. And yes. I want to emphasize how much it matters.
Well, how do you tell your story? For someone that's like, you know, I feel like there's so many people out there that just like, I just wish I could say it, you know, but and it's like either they're just stuck or they don't want to. Even in the space of listening, how do you listen? How do you get into that space where your ears are wide enough to hear many sides of the story? How do you do it when there's shame, when there's lack? Like you said earlier, Nico, that when there's anger, you know, it turns into lack. It gradually gets repressed, and it turns into I can't speak, I can't breathe, all these things. So what are some of the ways that you guys have found opened up that capacity?
I think for me, it's like you have to start with listening, in my opinion. Like, because if you can't listen, like, because I think that the thing with trauma is that, like, one tends to disconnect from oneself as a way of survival. Like, it's a survival mechanism and it works. And it's like actually amazing how it works, because people survive through like the craziest shit. I mean, you know, we've heard stories and we're like, whoa, you know, and it's like a testament to that resiliency of humanity. But I think that the healing really begins when we start to turn towards ourselves and listen in here. And the more that we listen in here, we're able to hear, we're able to be with the things we want to turn away from.
Well, how do you listen in here? Like, what is that? How do you do that? What does that actually mean like if you were to teach me to listen and hear, what would I be doing?
I think it's what you're doing right now. You're asking questions, right? It's like something arises, and instead of like turning your back and being like, oh no, fuck that, you're like, what? Okay. Like, well, what is that? I mean, what do you need? What's happening? And I think that's why, even I'm sure Riyaana can relate to this, being behind a camera and telling other people's stories. A lot of what we do is we observe, so we're quiet. We don't insert ourselves too much, but we insert ourselves just enough, right? Like, we ask questions.
There must be some
engage.
insertion.
Yeah, there's a little bit of insertion. Just the tip.
Just the tip.
Just a tip.
The tip.
Not gonna expand on that one. Please continue. Just a little bit of getting in there.
Yeah, it's like you engage, right? You're not just like a blank wall. You're like, I think that the way to approach listening to someone is to first connect with like your care for them. Like, do you give a shit? And for yourself too, right? It's like, do I care about this enough to actually turn towards it, even though I'm extremely uncomfortable, maybe terrified, And I think Jesse said this once, actually, which I loved. I don't know if it was in like the MMM event that you do, or if it was something else, but you said you were coaching someone and you were like, you gotta be more devoted to this person's like growth and happiness than you are to your own comfort. And I think, Jesse, that's so powerful, and it's so true. It's like, we have to, I think part of listening is like, there's a bit of getting messy and uncomfortable, and it's uncomfortable, but it's the beginning.
Yeah.
Juice.
Love it.
Juice boxes.
I feel like
juice out of udders, all the places juice comes from.
Beginning to scrape the surface. I can't believe we're over an hour already. My blood sugar is like, can you please pay attention to me already? And
It's
good opportunity to listen.
I just want to, I feel like the fact that I have a diverse team at Jesse Johnson Coaching is my honor and my gift. Like, I feel like the recipient of that. My ego, of course, would love to be like, yeah, everybody look at me. But like, I don't actually.
It's doing that.
It is doing that. I wanted to come back to that because I'm like, no, I feel like it is my blessing that you guys have agreed to support this mission. And I feel like because we are working together, we are facilitating liberation bigger, more effectively, more efficiently, more at scale. And I'm just super grateful. I can't work with people who don't challenge me, who don't have this fundamental willingness to grow and to invest in growth culturally, personally, spiritually. I feel not at all surprised by the depth of our conversation tonight, but really honored, really, really grateful. So on that level. And then I also just want to shout you guys out that Riyaana and Nico have their own lives and projects and missions and influencerships. Like, I am privileged to have them on my team. Same thing with Sri, obviously. And to please follow them right now. If you're watching this on a computer, go to your phone and get on Instagram, and you see all their little right? Get the spelling right. And follow Nico. Yeah, like that right there. So, but on their screen.
It's the elephant through the needle. It's the elephant through the needle.
Nico and Riyaana, how can we help you? How can these beautiful people watching serve and support you right now? have some
I have
things in mind
two.
if you struggle
Yeah.
to come up with something to ask for.
No, you stop me. I'll keep asking all night for things that I want. Well, the first thing is ask people. Ask people what their story is, especially the people that you think you know, especially the people that have been in your life for a long, long time, and you kind of just take that for granted, you know? Especially if those people come from another country, have a different skin tone, get extra curious, like really get to know your people and ask them to share their story, because you're going to catch them off guard and you're going to make them think about it, and you're going to give them the beautiful opportunity to like stretch into that vulnerable, uncomfortable, like, oh, me? Well, this is what I've been through, and this is what makes me me and what I've learned. So ask your peeps. And then the second thing is you can also follow Beyond Driven F1, which is the title of my new documentary that comes out at the end of this month.
It's so amazing.
Jesse's seen it. Yes.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, she came to our screening. It is not about race, but it is very much about never giving up and just strength of character. It's about women in formula racing. It's some of the most inspiring work I've ever done, and it has taught me so much about passion and purpose. And this is a nice little end to it. It really reaffirmed for me that the stuff of our life, like the shit that we're born with and the stuff that we get to uproot and the stuff that we get to create ourselves, none of it is on accident. Like, we are surrounded with like the material of our purpose, and we've got to start like mining all the shit that is around us, and we got to start owning it and really running with it. Like, our purpose is all around us. Oftentimes it's the main theme of that story. When you ask somebody, tell me about you, like really listen to what they're getting at, because that theme is so interwoven with like what they're here to do and their gift. And you know, let's listen for that in each other and cheer it on. Thank you, Jesse. Yes. Watch my movie.
Watch it. Beyond Driven.
People
That's
can,
the link.
Like, they can pre-order the film right now, right?
They can, yes.
And when's
yes.
the release?
Pre-order it on iTunes, and it comes out June 30th on Amazon Video, you know, the cables of the world, Comcast, Spectrums, all the Voodoo's,
Jesse
Xboxes.
Johnson Coaching will definitely be promoting this. It's amazing. Yeah. Very on brand.
Thank you, Jesse and Sri.
Riyaana, I feel like we didn't even scratch the surface of your story. So I'm just gonna log that we have another interview to do with you.
Oh yes, the whole like I was born into apartheid thing, and know firsthand of how bad this can really get if we don't get our shit together, and also how good it can really get coming from apartheid and seeing things like truth and reconciliation, you know, and the magic that being seen and heard can do, and healing. Like, yeah, we'll put a pin in it.
So good.
For round 2.
Thank you.
Yeah, shout out to Nelson Mandela. Homie was in prison forever, and he came out like, I love you guys.
Hey, everybody, I'm out. I am out.
Wildly belligerent. That is so belligerent.
Yeah, it's so belligerent.
I don't love everybody. How are you gonna be like, you know what? No punishment. Let's just talk about what happened.
Let's just talk about it.
So belligerent.
Belligerent in love. Like that's
yes.
That's my goal. That's where I'm aiming. That's where my arrow's aiming. Yeah.
So where can we big you up?
You can follow me here.
Nico to the Wild.
Nico to the Wild. That's my personal page. It's a lot of posters and things going up there right now. I've been pretty silent on my own content, but you can also follow. I have a music group with my partner Chris Devsich, who these two both know really well. and love. And yeah, so that's at Truth and Love Music.
Ooh, how'd you get that
Instagram.
handle?
Right?
Truth and Love Music.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like a blend of like everything we love. Like, you know, it's a blend of hip hop and neo soul and R&B and like all of, you know, his activist history, like 10 plus years in the game, and my passion for just caring for ourselves and each other. And I would say like my big ask is for us to be willing and brave and courageous enough to hold each other in all of our trauma, in our beauty, in our celebration, in our weaknesses, in the places where we might be angry or fearful or defensive, that everyone who listened tonight and was touched by anything that any of us said, that we really walk out into the world and decide to care more about people's well-being and liberation and thriving and livelihood and healing than our own discomfort.
I hope.
Yeah.
Booyaka! Booyaka shot!
I can't do the Ollie G thing, you know, where he hits his knuckles.
Is it coming through?
Yes, coming through. The sound is so weird. Stop.
I haven't done it in a while, so I'm like breaking my wrist. You know, my wrist is like, what are you doing? Back in the days,
Shree.
that was all day back in the days.
Oh yeah.
Cheese on bread! The Bajan come out. Such a blessing being with you guys, with you all.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Sree, for being in the conversation together and for being in love, like as an interracial couple. Like it's beautiful, and I'm in an interracial relationship too, and it's fucking awesome. So
Yes.
I love it. Let's have like a triple date. We all have like interracial things going on.
Yes. I'll bring my Vietnamese lover to the mix.
Yeah. I think that that's a great idea.
Ciao.
Yeah, this chat can hold 6
Beautiful.
people, so maybe next time, who knows? We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Everyone who is
Thank you,
tuning
Sree
in
and
live,
Jesse.
yeah, I'm so honored to have this time with you, and everyone that was watching live. Thanks so much for being here and all your comments. Really, really powerful insights and just adding to the conversation. And if you watch, obviously, the replay, tell us your biggest takeaway. What was your like mic drop moment? Tag us. We will comment and respond, and anything we can do to serve at Jesse Johnson Coaching, let us know.